Hello, 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 and welcome back to DLA Alternative. It's your boy Brandon, and I hope everyone is doing phenomenal as always. And thank you as always to everyone who keeps subscribing, liking, and following this journey with us. We are on the road to 2K, people, so keep helping us get there. But yes, I know it's been kind of a little bit since I posted a video, but this past week I've been analyzing so unbelievably crazily hard. However, as you can tell by the thumbnail and title of this theory, yes, I have been analyzing the Nina project so unbelievably thoroughly, it's insane. And basically the reason being is I started picking up on some things that are said and things that just look a certain way, and I started getting the realization that they remind me of previous seasons. So what I started thinking about, I'm like, well, basically if we think of what the Nina project represents, correct, is basically it's an experiment or a training experiment for Eleven to get her powers back. And basically, as we know before this, okay, Owens is the one who ends up helping Eleven basically escape going to juvenile prison and helps her and leads her to this project. However, as I started analyzing the Nina project episode at the very beginning intro specifically, but as I started analyzing the intro specifically to the Nina project, I started realizing there is so many deep hidden connections to what we have seen before in this show. And like I said, the Nina project specifically is a training program for Eleven to basically refresh her memory about past traumatic events. And what does that end up doing, people? It ends up allowing her to get her powers back because she remembers those traumatic events that allowed her to achieve that power in the first place. So if we think about that, all right, and no doubt in my mind, as the more I'm going to explain some more things that I have caught and analyzed that will help you all analyze this yourselves. However, I am basically 100% convinced after analyzing this for the past week that the Duffer Brothers and the writer of this episode, specifically Kate Treefry, who worked on the Foreshadow origin story as well as the main writer, basically I'm motherfucking convinced that this project is no doubt in my mind an actual written project for us as fans to basically give us secret hidden hints involving the symbolism of all of these things we've never understood before. And yes, I know that sounds extremely confusing, so what we're going to do in this one is I'm going to show you what these specific parts of this intro connect to, and then at the end of this, what I'm going to tell you is that no doubt in my mind that there are some secret hints within what is said in this intro scene that allow us as fans, if we pay attention to it close enough, and basically, if you are willing to take on this challenge, okay, to basically take on this project yourselves of a memory refresher, no doubt in my mind, there are major hints and answers to things we've never known about in this show, specifically about the Russian involvement. Not so much connection to season 2, okay, but a deeper hidden connection to season 2, which is very interesting, and you'll catch on to that. But our main connection to a specific character and possibly her involvement with what happened on the inside of a specific top secret location that we call it. And more specifically involving Eleven to Will Byers vanishing, okay? And yes, I mean that for 100% no doubt that this gives us answers and shows us. Basically, if we take our girl Eleven, okay, and we look at her as one of the most major secrets and biggest hints to this show that it's ever had to offer for us as fans of this show and theorists of this show. No doubt in my mind that could be a major hint on how to read this show as a whole, and if the Duffer Brothers ever see this, I'm that confident that no doubt in my mind there's an incorporated little secret in this scene that basically, like I said, if you're willing to take on the challenge, you can find big connections, and I've already done it with a few scenes and it all matches up and it gives kind of a different type of storyline involving our girl Eleven. But what we're going to do in this first part of this theory, because I have we got to analyze a lot involving this chapter specifically because there is so much, and I've done a deep analysis already, and trust me, it's absolutely insane. However, what I'm going to show you within this intro scene, how they connect to previous seasons specifically, and how they are going to show us hidden connections to what we might have always wanted to know. Basically, what we're going to do is we're going to jump from part to part, and I'm going to show you what each of these parts represent. And then I want everybody to go on their own accord, and I want you guys to analyze this for yourself in this new mindset, in this new light. But the bigger picture to this is basically that we got to take the lessons we learned within the Nina project, okay, and basically use them as fans to trying to figure this out. And yes, like I said, it's a challenge, and this is no doubt in my mind, it's incorporated within what they say in this whole entire scene and the Nina project. Basically, they add in a lot of little jokes and phrases that are referred to us, like basically that it's driving us crazy trying to figure these things out, and if you're taking on this challenge that you want to give up. So, like I said, it's extremely confusing, but we're just going to jump into this, and we're going to jump from part to part, and I'm going to show you exactly what these things represent. And then I'm going to reveal to you at the very end of this what the big secret is, and possible big secret and hint in this is that what they basically give us as fans, so that anyone, like I said, can take on the challenge for yourself, because no doubt in my mind it was a challenge and it took a long time just to do a few scenes, no doubt in my mind. However, let's jump right into this one, and I hope you guys like this one, alright? Because the very first scene, how this scene kicks off, alright, we see this paved road, right? And then basically, real quickly, our attention gets pulled right away to this shot of the van going down the road, and basically we get pulled inside of this van and into this story that's happening on the inside. However, what we see here, people, is we see our group, and they're basically just rushing, they're trying to figure stuff out, it's kind of chaotic, right? However, the main thing we are seeing, okay, is they're trying to figure out how to save this guy's life, they're trying to stop the bleeding, and they're all just freaking out. And more specifically, the bigger picture here is that they are running from something at this moment in time, okay? However, as this man is about to die, okay, and we see that this man is probably about to die, he basically gives them the pen, okay? And he gives them a pen with no answers. And then all of a sudden it gets extremely chaotic, and then this guy passes away and we get no answers about what he meant about this pen. So basically all he told them about the pen, okay, was that here's the number, and they don't know what that means. However, like I said, all of a sudden this guy passes away, and then basically Argyle turns around and he goes, oh shit, that guy dead? And then basically after that, what we see is our boy Will, he realizes is that something is behind him, or that something is coming, okay, and then he kind of just tells Argyle straight up to get off of the road. And then as we see that something is coming closer and closer, alright, they all start screaming and they say, get off of the road, get off to the road. And basically Argyle listens and he drives off of this paved road. Now, what I'm going to tell you is that basically within this, there's a lot of hidden hints with what is said and the connections of what everything represents. However, what we are seeing here is a representation of what possibly happened before Will Byers' vanishing, and then right at the time when we see him going down that road. Basically ending at the point when he goes off of that road, okay? And you might have caught on to the little bit of symbolism I'm trying to put in with what I'm saying here, okay? But the main thing is that's kind of how it's thrown at us. It's just thrown at us as kind of little puzzles and hints, alright? And if you don't really connect to everything that's going on, it's really hard to understand. But there's a reason why I mentioned a few of those specific things, okay? And like I said, that's kind of what this represents. However, there's a huge thing and a huge unanswered question about what has happened and how this show actually starts, okay? The intro, which also connects to this. But that big thing we have no answers to whatsoever, and everything that occurred is the very intro of the show, involving that scientist running from that room and then running into that elevator to basically witness a new problem. And yes, I say a new problem because no doubt in my mind that man was running from one problem and then entered trying to escape into that elevator to basically be revealed to a new problem that ends up killing him. And as we know after that, we get no answers, and still to this day we have gotten no answers regarding that. But here, okay, there's a lot of hidden connections involving that. And more specifically on how to read these scenes, okay? So we're just going to jump into the next scene, and at the end I will describe how to read these scenes and how to really pay attention to this. But this next scene, okay, is all of these soldiers raiding the Byers' house, okay? They're looking through all their shit, they're just breaking everything. And basically this is kind of happening at the same moment or maybe after this. We really don't know, okay? But I'm thinking after this. Because what happens here is basically they're looking through the house, they're trying this destroyed place, okay? And then all of a sudden this soldier finds this note. Or more specifically, what we're going to call it, a sign from L. And it straight up says on that note, from L, okay? However, what I want you to keep in mind is what I think this represents is possible answers or connections to what we don't know about Hopper's involvement at the very end of season 1. More specifically, after they saved Will Byers and he starts to leave that hospital, and we get that mysterious scene with him entering this car. So, no doubt in my mind, we know Hopper is a soldier, and we figure that out in this season, more specifically, that he talks deeply about that in this season. But what you got to keep in mind is that he's the soldier in our group and what we're trying to figure things out about, specifically with Jim Hopper's story and backstory. And like I said, one of those things we've never really gotten answers to, once again, is how Hopper knew 11 was still alive at the end of season 1 and why he went out to the Force and left those Egos. That question has always been a huge question in my mind and what I've been trying to figure out. But if you think about this here, okay, this could represent some secrets here. Basically, this soldier is talking to this secret agent man, okay? So just think of these guys, that guy who just passed away, and then this guy as secrets. Because basically what we see here is he shows us a sign from Elle, and then he wants to know where to find her. So no doubt in my mind, I want to know your thoughts about who you think this secret agent man could represent, okay? And I mean, I have my thoughts about a few people, but I want to know your thoughts first. Because that sign from Elle, if you're not paying attention, all right, once I reveal these big secrets on how to figure this shit out, but if you're not paying attention, that was a sign from Elle, no doubt in my mind, because as we get into this next scene, what do we see? We see 11 wake up. And basically, she wakes up in the back seat to Owen's turning around and apologizing for the bumpy ride. And basically, he says, I would have paved a road, but that would have ruined the whole top secret location thing. So what this scene is representing, in my opinion, is possibly some hidden answers involving Owens and 11, and possibly before she escaped Hawkins' lab. And the reason being is a lot of what I've analyzed before this, which we're going to do in part 2. But my point is I want to put that on you, is that's what I think this section represents. So analyze that in that light. However, the major hint here is how he says it kind of would have ruined the top secret location thing. And what he's talking about here is Will Byers' shed. And what we're analyzing here is 11, and that's who our main focus is going to be on for the remainder of any of these parts in this video series. Because as the scene continues, you're going to start seeing signs, okay, when you start reading this and start analyzing this, that basically this is representing 11's involvement with everything. And more specifically, everything that's going on around her represents other things as well. That's why this gets extremely fucking interesting. Because what we see here, people, is we see after they have that little conversation, all of a sudden we see them driving down an unpaved road, all right? So keep that in mind. And then all of a sudden we get a timestamp that says 12 hours ago. So what I'm thinking is that this 12 hours ago, okay, could be a timestamp of how long before Will Byers vanished, specifically that when 11 escaped Hawkins' lab. Not exactly right at that 12-hour mark, okay, but as we see right in this next scene is we see this random deserted area with this random little door in this small little area, okay, and then we see the car pull up. So as we see this, we see 11 has come across this new place and this new deserted land, right? But what she does is she exits that vehicle. She exits where she just came from, okay? And she gets out of that car and she closes that door on what happened before. And what we see is 11 look very curious and she walks directly towards us. So this is a representation that 11 is what our main focus needs to be on. Because what this whole entire area represents, no doubt in my mind, is the buyer's land or property, okay? What we see is this car, okay? And there's still some things I need to figure out, but what we see is this car, and we see 11 get out of this car, okay? Pulling up to this place. But then as 11 comes across this place, okay, she looks very curious and she kind of walks through this deserted area. And this deserted area represents basically the buyer's house. So the hint I'm picking up on here is that 11 has nothing to do with what happened, say, on the inside of the buyer's house the night of Will's vanishing. Because what we see is as she walks towards us, it kind of skips past that area and it goes directly to that door, which represents Will Byers' shed. And what we see here is that our main focus really isn't on Owens right now, but Owens opens this door for her. So basically this door was opened for 11, all right, and she gets curious and she ends up walking into this door. So the vibe I'm getting here, people, and the hints I'm picking up is that this could be showing us a representation, like very hidden and symbolically, and everything we know is kind of out of this picture if you think about it. Specifically involving Will Byers vanishing, okay? Everything we know that night is not involved within this except that shed. So the thing people have been trying to figure out is if 11 is involved with Will Byers vanishing, how she knows Will and all of this shit. But if you think about the symbolism here, we kind of get this hidden symbolic answer that refreshes our memory if we pay attention to what we're seeing. Because as this continues, all right, that's your little hint that this is what represents 11 and what happened on the outside of the shed. And yes, I say the outside of the shed for a specific reason, people, okay? Because as 11 now enters this shed, okay, as we're calling this door, basically what we see is a deeper hidden connection symbolically. Her and Owens look down, they enter this, and they close the door on the outside portion of that shed. So what this represents is the deeper hidden connection connected to the inside portion of Will Byers' shed. No doubt in my mind, 100% as we are inside of this shed, okay, in this show, as we see anything inside of this shed, that is symbolically giving us answers and more clues and hints on what happened and the involvement of what happened to Will Byers on the inside. And because that door has been closed, people, that means that the door has been closed to whatever happened on the outside. However, there is a lot happening still on the outside. More specifically, our entire season of season 4. So that makes this extremely interesting here, people, is that if everything we're seeing on the outside portion has something to do with what Will Byers saw that night and on the outside of his shed, that changes the motherfucking game of this show, no doubt in my mind, and it raises a lot of questions that I have been wanting answers to, no doubt in my mind. Because I've had this thought in previous theories, and I've said it a lot, that I have a feeling that 11 is involved with Will Byers vanishing one way or another. However, I've never saw it that she tried to harm him. I truly believe that she tried to save his life. And more specifically from the Demogorgon, the other involvement, okay? So that would mean that there is 4 total involvements involved with Will Byers vanishing from what I'm seeing, okay? An outside involvement of 11 as we're seeing that she has involvement with the outside and the inside portion of the shed. And now if we pay attention to what happens on the inside portion of the Nina Project and not the outside portion of the rest of the season, basically what we get is hidden connections and more answers to exactly what happened to Will Byers and what happened on the inside portion. So as we know, our outside story that gets locked away and is kept outside is our story of season 4 more than anything. And then as we just saw, Owens, who basically represents Hawkins Lab in my opinion, as well as 11, they both enter this door. So Hawkins Lab and 11 have partial involvement with both the inside and outside portions of the shed. But as we are getting locked into this, we are going to figure out how Hawkins Lab connects to all this, how 11 connects to all this, and how, more importantly, the Russians do. But the most important thing is our Demogorgon and how it got there, people. So, like I said, in part 2, we're going to connect a little deeper, but what I want to do is continue these representations, and I'm going to leave it up to you to continue until part 2. And then, like I said, there's a big secret on how to try and read this correctly, okay? But let's just keep going. Because as we have this understanding, all right, that the door is locked away on the outside portion of this shed, so what we are figuring out here is trying to get answers about what happened on the inside. But the first reveal is that there's a deeper hidden connection, okay? And this deeper hidden connection connects to season 2 more than anything. However, what you got to keep in mind is that they are not in this area for a very long time, so that's very interesting. And season 2 is mainly majority about Will and the Mind Flayer. So as we see, our main focus is 11, okay? So if we focus on 11 just in this short little stairwell here, we get more answers and more connections here because of our other secret hidden connection that we're not really paying attention to here, being our boy Owens. If you haven't caught on to that, okay, when in season 2, when we first ever see an interaction between 11 and Owens, it happens on a staircase. So, no doubt in my mind, that's a straight connection to that. But that, like I said, this area is a deeper hidden connection area. So, that raises a lot of questions. And as we saw, all right, people, that Owens was involved with the outside portion, this first section of this. So I'm going to leave that up for your own thoughts and assumptions and likes down in the comments, all right? But let me know your thoughts. However, what we see here, people, is that they take this deeper hidden connection and they get led to an elevator that is on the inside of this door. So if you have not caught on to that, we kind of jumped from season 1 to season 2, but only a slight portion of season 2, a slight hidden connection. And what that slight hidden connection led us to from season 1 is now to a representation of Starcourt Mall in season 3. And more specifically, our group at the mall who ends up finding the delivery door that ends up leading to an elevator. However, like I said, there's no staircase, there's no hidden connection involving that, right? But there is, and that is our other mysterious location that we have no answers to, being Hess Farm, involved with a mysterious hidden connection that connects to a staircase. So if you are starting to slowly connect this, that's what we're supposed to do here, is we're supposed to take things slow. And I know I'm kind of talking quickly, but that's why we're going to analyze in a slower way in part 2 of this, and that's why I felt this was the best way to represent this now. However, as we keep going, they take this hidden connection from season 1 and they go straight to season 3. And what we see is that this door is now opening for us as fans to get some answers involving all of that if we skip that little hidden connection here. Because right before they enter here, people, Owens kind of holds 11 back for a second. He's like, slow down, slow down. And then as that door fully opens, they both step in real slowly and then they kind of just turn around and Owens is the one that locks this gate. So, as we know, season 2 kind of represented that small little area, right? And as we know, at the end of season 2, right before 11's and Owens meet, okay, 11's ends up closing the gate. However, what I want you to keep in mind is that we are trying to find answers about what happened to the inside portion of the shed. And yes, involving Will Byers vanishing, okay? So how does this all connect here? Well, like I just said, okay, Owens is the one that ended up closing this gate. So, if we're trying to find a deeper hidden connection specifically involving season 2 and now involving Owens, okay, and possibly something that 11 was involved with, all connecting to the inside portion of the Will Byers shed, basically in season 2 we have another really random thing that we have never really gotten any answers to as to what was in the Byers shed that happened and what they see in the Byers shed in season 1. Because as we jump to season 2, alright, if you think about it, we end up having a whole entire scene with a whole entire group involved with the Will Byers shed where they take everything out of it. However, what we do not see any signs of is any signs of a gate, any signs of anything that has gone wrong involved with that shed, right? Well, like I just said, as we kind of skip that hidden connection here, Owens is the one who sealed that gate or shut that gate. And what I'm going to connect here is if we jump straight to season 3 like we're doing right here is when Joyce wants proof, okay? Proof of the truth. Basically, that Hawkins lab is not the one that's involved with what's happening in season 3, okay? They go to Hawkins lab and Hopper has to prove to her that he watched them seal the gate, okay? And as we know, Owens is the one who was involved in all of season 2. And as we know, there's something random about the Byers shed we know nothing about. And as we see in season 2, like I just said, we don't get any answers to that. We see involvement within that shed, but we don't see anything. So does that raise the question that maybe Owens, since we know there's this secret involvement at the very end of season 1, right after all of this, and also with Hopper connecting Owens, who connects to Joyce, who now connects to Will, if we connect all of these people and connect all these dots, does that raise the question that Owens might have had involvement with sealing a gate in Will Byers' shed? So, as we get to this part in this scene, okay, this is where we're going to come to a close with this theory, alright? Because now I'm going to start telling you how I started kind of finding all of these connections. Basically, before we end up taking ourselves and going down deeper into a deeper rabbit hole, people, what we're going to do is we're going to refresh our memories and we're going to connect these first things we talked about, alright? And then as we analyze those scenes and we start talking about it and trying to get our answers to these deeper things that are said and everything, what we're going to do is we're going to go down into this rabbit hole and we're going to analyze some more within this intro scene. But the reason we're going to cut it off here is because what Owen says here to 11 is what drew my attention to even analyze this in a different type of way. Basically what Owen says to 11 here, okay, before that elevator door closes on us as fans, okay, before the door is closing, what we hear him say to 11, he kind of kids and he kind of jokes and he goes, "What, you didn't think we were working out of a shed now, did you?" So if you think about that as a very, very major hint, okay, to something involving Hawkins lab, and like I said, that we only kind of see a partial involvement. more specifically on the inside portion of the shed, that it's their involvement started on the outside, and 11 is our main focus about what happened on the inside. So if you really think about what he just said here, he basically says that we're not really working inside of the shed. How he says we're not working out of a shed, meaning inside. So as he makes this little joke, 11 kind of stays quiet. So that's kind of also a little hint that maybe Hawkins' lab is not directly involved with what happened on the inside. But obviously their involvement is none other than our girl 11, who is kind of staying quiet about this situation like she does in season 1, okay? She doesn't really understand those answers, okay? And that's kind of what we are about to end up going to see in this Nina project. But, like I said, there's some secret little clues and hints, alright, that lead up to all of this. And what I want you guys to know is that this is absolutely insane. However, I wanted to match a couple things up here to our intro, and I'm like, okay, well, there's some odd stuff, and there's this whole thought about the 815 theory and the timestamp of when Will Byers vanished, right? Well, the part we have not talked about here, and we haven't gone down into the rabbit hole where we end up seeing all those scientists, and we end up seeing the Nina Project and meet Papa, the reveal of Papa. But what I want you to keep in mind here is that the main thing that intrigued me, other than what Owens just said to 11 regarding the shed comment, basically what we see after those two little intro scenes, those two little involvements, two little hints, right? We get some connections to our very, very intro scene of the show, and we also get some answers or some connections specifically to how Hopper could be involved with Owens. But what I want you to keep in mind is those scenes kind of come to a close with a small little blackout, if you think about it, and then all of a sudden 11 wakes up. Well, what I want you to keep in mind, alright, is that when 11 wakes up is at timestamp 236, and if you add those together, that equals 11. So, as I said, we're not going to talk about it in this theory too much, but this scene ends up coming to a close with basically Brenner holding 11 after they try and put her to sleep with that syringe. And basically what happens, people, okay, 11 ends up closing her eyes again, and that's how this scene kind of comes to a close. So as I noticed that timestamp of 236 adding up to 11, I was like, well, maybe, just maybe, when she closes her eyes, does that timestamp add up to 11? So what I want you to do is kind of just jump to that scene, alright, and kind of go to that scene right when 11 is about to close her eyes. And what you will see, at least when you watch on a television set, okay, these timestamps are specific to me watching them on a TV. I did try to get these timestamps on my computer, and they were a little bit off different times every single time I tried it. So that could be because of loading and all that shit. So just keep that in mind that on a TV it was almost exact every single time. But when I go to that scene, okay, when 11 closes her eyes, right at that moment, right when she's about to close her eyes, and they actually pretty much close, is the timestamp 812, which more specifically also adds up to 11. But there's something that's very interesting about that timestamp and everything that is going on here and what we've talked about. More specifically, this might show you a little bit of proof that that timestamp and those timestamps that add up to 11 have extremely big significance in this entire show. And yes, I know that sounds crazy, but logically, okay, if you really think about it, people, if they were trying to match things up to the timestamp, those specific timestamps, you would end up knowing, you could write them all down. But more specifically, if you were filming, okay, you'd be able to kind of match up and make scenes go according to timestamps of 11. So what do I mean by that is, as I analyze this whole intro scene, okay, I analyze this scene specifically regarding to the timestamps that equal 11, like 11, 29, 38, 47, 56, and onward, people. Yes, I did this for the entire intro, and no doubt in my mind there are major secrets and hints involving that timestamp and possibly involving this entire show. Because what I did after I analyzed it in this new light, okay, and I know that's a lot and a lot of people won't want to do that, but there's specific timestamps that matter and have some very, very big things that could connect. More specifically, the timestamp that we are talking about right now, okay, at timestamp 812, which equals 11. But what I want you to do, people, is I kind of mentioned it earlier, is that when Will Byers vanishes, it's around 815. It is not exactly at 815. However, if you go to the Vanishing of Will Byers scene and you're on your TV and you look at those timestamps, okay, you should be able to see it pretty clear right when that flash, that light bulb, okay, we see the light bulb and it's making that sound and it's zooming in. right at timestamp 812, the same exact timestamp that equals 11 is when that light bulb flashes out and it reveals that Will Byers has vanished and no one is there. So that's what led me on that journey to doing it in a deeper connection. And trust me, it led me on this journey to realizing that there's even a hint within what we talked about here that tells us this. So you might have caught something about how I said there's this secret hidden number, okay? And that is all the way at the very beginning of what we talked about here. Basically, like I said, we got these secret agents, all right, that we're going to use as our secrets in this show. And what he gives them is a pen, and more specifically referred to a specific number. And they do not receive a number, correct? Well, like we figure out later in this episode that Mike ends up finding this number that's inside of the pen that ends up leading them to the Nina Project. So, like I said, that's for this show, and that's happening on the outside to give them answers about how to get to Nina and try and find 11 so that all of these answers can come together as one. But if we think about that line right there about when he gives them that pen, okay, and we think about this as a little secret hint to us. If you go to that timestamp and you go to when he hands them that pen and he says, here is the number. If you look at the timestamp, that timestamp is at 56 seconds, which also equals 11. So that is the major thing that helped me analyze this in this new light and started realizing all of these connections was because of that alone. When I noticed 11 wake up and 11 go to sleep and how it connected directly to Will Byers vanishing in that moment, the fact that all of those timestamps equals 11 and all of these things have a significant connection and meaning. Basically, I just tried to do that strategy within the very beginning of this episode, and that's what it led me to within the first 56 seconds, people, is that basically he gave me a number that equaled 11. So what I did is I continued that scenario and continued, and if you connect those things directly with no context necessarily, basically just whatever is happening or said directly on those timestamps, it makes you open your mind to understanding connections, people. And yes, I don't even remember if I said it earlier, but what I have done is I have also done this with the intro scene to this whole show. And that is what led me on being able to connect these things here today. So let me know your thoughts about all of this. And what we're going to do in a part 2 of this is we're going to go in deep and we're going to analyze everything that's said. And what I want you to keep in mind is a lot of what I said in here, some of those timestamps match up to what happens in the intro of that season. More specifically, I'm going to just give you a funny one, okay? When Argyle, like I said earlier, basically turns around and he says, oh shit, that guy is dead, man. That more specifically is at timestamp 128, which is also a mix-up of what we just did with those timestamps. But timestamp 128 also equals 11, and that's what he says there. So if you go to the intro of this show, okay, that is also at the timestamp of when that scientist is in the elevator. And more specifically, directly when he hears a noise above him, like there's something else above him in a second issue. So, like I said, there's a lot of random connections here, but there's something weird about timestamps matching up specifically to the intro of the Nina Project and to the intro of this show. I don't know how on point they are, and that's the hardest part of how I've had to try and figure out how to represent this. But no doubt in my mind, I am onto something without a doubt, and I have a lot of answers already, so we're going to continue this in a part 2, and I hope you guys like this one. But what I want all of you guys to do is try and go analyze this, not just in the whole 11 theory with the timestamps, but start analyzing this as to how things play out, the order of things, how they play out within this Nina Project intro scene, but more specifically, the entire episode itself, not even just including what happens inside of the Nina Project, and also the things that happened in the show after this in the last 4 episodes, and also with the first 4 episodes, because no doubt in my mind, those have big connections to specific seasons. More specifically, chapters 1 through 4 have big connections to seasons 1 through 4 in that order. And as we get to our chapter 5 being the Nina Project, basically that's when we're now getting a full-on mix of everything and all at once happening right now. But just let me know your thoughts. I know this is a lot to take in, but I hope you guys like this one. So just keep subscribing, liking, following this journey, and you guys already know we out.